I was stretched out in my hammock, book in hand, living my best peaceful, lake-like fantasy when the ground beneath me started to hum. Not the good kind of hum, either. Not bees or wind through the trees. This was industrial, mechanical, aggressively unwelcome. By the time I stumbled out to my porch in flip-flops and confusion, a bulldozer had pulled into my driveway like it owned the place. Behind it stood a demolition crew, one guy filming a selfie with my chimney like this was a sightseeing tour, and standing front and center barking orders with the grace of a bored dictator was Barbara Wilson, president of the Lakeside Estates HOA and unofficial captain of neighborhood tyranny. She waved a stack of papers at me like she was serving justice on a silver platter and barked, "This structure violates HOA code. It's coming down today." I stared at her, still holding my half-read paperback, and said, "You do know this cabin was here before your little HOA ever existed, right?" She didn't even flinch. "Doesn't matter. We've expanded jurisdiction. It's official." That's when I smiled. Slow, quiet, dangerous. "Then I wonder how your board will feel when they learn I hold the deed to the land under your lakeside clubhouse." Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts. Her face dropped faster than real estate prices during a flood warning. No words, just silence. Wide-eyed, breath-held, red-faced silence. If this had been a cartoon, you'd have heard a vinyl record scratch and the sound of her pearls tightening around her throat. She looked at me, then back at her demolition crew, and I swear even the guy with the phone paused mid-selfie. That's when I leaned against my porch railing and said, "Interesting, right? You show up with a bulldozer, and I show up with ownership paperwork." Her response? She tried to pivot. "Our expansion was approved by the town council." "Good," I said, "because they're about to be part of the same legal funhouse." And just like that, her army of clipboard-wielding enforcers suddenly looked like a high school theater crew that had wandered into the wrong stage. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a hostile land grab, and she had picked the wrong heir to mess with. Let me rewind the tape for a second. My name's Mike Peterson, 35 years old, software engineer by trade. I like strong coffee, weak Wi-Fi signals, and quiet mornings on the lake. A few months ago, I inherited this cabin from my grandfather, Richard, the original owner, builder, and, frankly, neighborhood legend. He bought the land in the 1940s, long before Lakeside Estates became a development of manicured hedges and mandatory mailbox colors. Grandpa built this place with his own two hands, right down to the stone chimney and the cedar porch swing. Every summer of my childhood was spent here, fishing, helping him patch the roof, and listening to stories that danced between folklore and hard-earned wisdom. This cabin wasn't just old wood. It was the pulse of a family line, the kind of place where memory lived in every creaky floorboard. When Grandpa passed, he left me this land, this cabin, and a simple handwritten note. "Keep it standing longer than I did." So when I started fixing it up, it wasn't some HGTV makeover project. I wasn't trying to flip it for profit. I was trying to restore it, not just physically, but spiritually. I replaced the rotten boards, sealed the roof, even installed flower boxes. I swear I heard Grandpa groan from the great beyond when I painted them blue. But I did it anyway. Then one day, out of nowhere, I got a letter. Official-looking, expensive letterhead. Violation notice. This structure fails to meet HOA aesthetic standards. I nearly laughed coffee through my nose. My property wasn't part of any HOA. The cabin had been grandfathered in, literally. It predated the whole Lakeside Estates development. I tossed the letter into the fireplace and watched it burn with poetic flair. But that was only the beginning. The letters didn't stop. They escalated. Weekly notices, threats of fines, demolition warnings. At first, I ignored them, assuming someone in the HOA was confused or overeager. But then I noticed their tone shift. Final notice. Structure may be subject to removal. $500, 0 cents per day fines effective immediately. That's when I stopped laughing and picked up the phone. I called Uncle Sam, my father's older brother, and the man who had handled Grandpa's estate. He was retired, cranky, and the kind of man who read zoning ordinances for fun. When I told him what was happening, he didn't miss a beat. "Pack up the paperwork, kid. We've got work to do." I told him, "They're trying to erase history." And he just said, "Then it's time we reminded them who wrote it." And just like that, my next chapter began. Not with hammers or nails, but with signatures and statute numbers. Because if Barbara Wilson and her clipboard brigade wanted a war, they'd get one. Only this time, I had the home field advantage. The county records office hadn't changed much since high school. Same flickering fluorescent lights, same government-issue coffee smell, same Tom Jenkins behind the front desk, only now, Tom had a bald spot and a badge of bureaucratic power clipped to his flannel. When he spotted me, his face lit up like someone just handed him front-row tickets to a county scandal. "Mike Peterson! Man, it's been years. What brings you in?" I glanced at Uncle Sam, who was already pulling papers out of his leather briefcase like a magician about to make someone disappear. "Looking for some old dirt," I said. Tom laughed and led us into the archives. Within minutes, we had rolls of maps, dusty files, and digitized property surveys from before the Beatles broke up. Sam pointed to one yellowed deed and said, "This is what we need," and there it was. The original purchase from 1948. Grandpa Richard had bought a massive chunk of lakeside land before indoor plumbing was trendy, but what came next made my jaw tighten. Turns out Grandpa had sold off most of the land in the ADS to the developers, who later became Lakeside Estates. But he held on to 3 plots, Plot 6, where the cabin stood, and Plots 7 and 8, which extended right into the heart of the HOA's pride and joy, their clubhouse and their Olympic-sized ego pool. I traced the lines with my finger. "You're telling me the HOA built their entire headquarters on our land?" Sam nodded, calm as ever. "Yep, either their title company was asleep, or they thought nobody would ever check, but the deed's clear as day." I couldn't stop staring. It was like discovering the dragon built its lair on your grandpa's toolbox. They'd been fining me for flower boxes while hosting cocktail fundraisers on land they didn't even own. The hypocrisy was so thick you could butter toast with it. And just like that, the wind shifted. I wasn't the one in trouble anymore. They were. Sam turned to a printout from the HOA's so-called jurisdiction map, the one Barbara waved like a holy scroll. Compared side by side, it was obvious. They'd redrawn the lines like a 5-year-old with a box of crayons and no supervision. The HOA's map swallowed properties it never had legal claim to, including mine. "This isn't just creative zoning," Sam said. "This is fraudulent boundary expansion," I laughed, bitter and loud. "So Barbara's kingdom is built on sand." Sam leaned in, eyes sharp. "Power only matters when no one calls its bluff." That sentence stayed with me, humming like an engine in the back of my mind. For years, the HOA had pushed people around with fines, threats, and bad faith, and no one had pushed back. Until now. As we walked out, I wasn't thinking about my porch or the flower boxes anymore. I was thinking about all the neighbors who'd quietly sold their homes to avoid conflict, the ones who'd packed up and moved because they didn't have the energy or resources to fight, people who'd been bullied under the guise of community standards. This wasn't about me. This was about every voice Barbara had tried to silence with her pastel tyranny. If Grandpa had left me anything besides land, it was a spine. And I wasn't going to let them bulldoze either. That's when the mission changed. No more defense. I was going on offense. Not just for the cabin, for the principle, for the people, for the truth. Just before we left, Tom pulled me aside, his tone shifting from friendly to firm. "Mike, off the record, be careful. Barbara's not just a bored retiree with too much time. She's got strings in City Hall. Her husband was on the council for years. She's tight with zoning. Even Judge Williams. Some say Barbara backed her campaign." I nodded slowly, the weight of it settling in. Thanks, Tom. Really. He handed me a flash drive with digital copies of the deeds. You're not wrong to fight. Just know you're not up against a homeowners group, you're up against a machine. And as I stepped back into the sun, I realized exactly what I had in my hands. Paper proof that could burn down an empire built on lies. The next move was mine. And I intended to make it count. Steve met me at the corner of the Clubhouse parking lot. Dressed like we were about to crash a charity auction, he handed me a name tag that read Mark Patterson and whispered, "Remember, you're from Asheville, software engineer, loves kayaking and hates untrimmed hedges." I adjusted my collar and muttered, "Let's hope they don't ask me to recite the HOA bylaws." We walked through the doors and stepped into what looked less like a neighborhood meeting and more like Versailles got a Home Depot gift card. Marble floors so shiny I could see my mortgage-free reflection, gilded signage, fresh-cut orchids everywhere. Someone was spending HOA dues like it was Monopoly money. I nodded and smiled as we passed other guests, trying to channel the energy of a man who genuinely cared about decorative mulch compliance. And as ridiculous as it looked, it worked. No one batted an eye. In fact, someone offered me a glass of wine before I even finished pretending to admire the crystal light fixtures. Steve leaned in, voice low. "The show's about to start. Brace yourself." Barbara Wilson took the stage. Well, technically the podium, but it may as well have been a stage. She stood with the posture of a general and the smile of a used car dealer at a lemon lot clearance sale. "Good evening, Lakeside Estates family," she began, her voice soaked in artificial warmth. "We're thrilled to share the next phase of our vision, the Lakeside Wellness Center." The projector clicked, and up came a slide that nearly made me drop my Pinot Noir. There it was, my cabin. Only it wasn't a cabin anymore. It was labeled Zen Garden and Yoga Studio, complete with hammocks strung between where my front porch should be, and a koi pond that replaced Grandpa's old firewood stack. Another slide showed eucalyptus-scented saunas, a juice bar, even an aromatherapy reflection dock that ran right through my fishing spot. My hands started to shake. My history was about to be turned into a yoga mat rack. Barbara beamed. "This will increase our property values by 22%, she said, as if that justified setting fire to someone's legacy with scented candles. The presentation ended, and guests clapped like they were being paid per applause. I made my way to the bar, needing something stronger than wine. That's when I spotted Barbara in the corner, huddled with none other than Marcus Thompson, town council member and all-around political chameleon. I pretended to study the charcuterie board while inching closer. "We'll push the emergency eviction through Judge Williams by Monday," Barbara said, voice low but confident. "He's OODA since the campaign." Marcus sipped his drink and nodded. "We just need the permit rubber stamp before any objections get traction." Barbara looked around, then added, "Peterson's already a problem. If he contests, we delay everything. But if he's out before the press catches wind, it's clean." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Are you sure he doesn't know about the land?" Barbara smiled like a shark in pearls. "Doesn't matter. By the time he figures it out, he'll be too broke or too evicted to fight it." I backed away, hands sweaty. They weren't just overreaching. They were orchestrating a takedown. One with forged maps, bought judges, and a timeline that ended with my home in rubble. I knew what I had to do next, even if it was borderline insane. While the guests migrated toward the hors d'oeuvres, I slipped down the hallway toward the HOA administration wing. I found the door labeled Records and tested the knob. Locked. I glanced over my shoulder, then pulled out the laminated insurance card I'd tucked in my wallet for emergencies. This definitely qualified. A little pressure, a little prayer, and the lock popped with a satisfying click. The office was dimly lit and smelled like toner and old secrets. Filing cabinets lined the walls, each one bursting with binders, folders, and a few post-it notes that should probably be in evidence. I snapped photos of everything. Budget spreadsheets with unreported allocations, meeting minutes referring to reclassification strategies, and even internal memos labeled Peterson Property Acquisition Timeline. In one document, there was a line that chilled me. Phase 2 to begin once non-conforming structure is removed. Method, legal or discretionary. This wasn't just snooping. This was archaeology with consequences. Footsteps echoed down the hall. I barely had time to slide into the supply closet before the door opened. Through the slats, I watched Barbara enter with Marcus in tow. "The council won't stall much longer," Marcus said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Peterson's lawyer is asking questions." Barbara scoffed. "Let him ask. We've got the documents in place, and if he gets too loud, we can always fall back on code violations. If he doesn't move, well, accidents happen." Marcus didn't respond. Barbara continued, her tone venomously sweet. "Old cabins go up fast. One faulty wire, one spark. It's not our fault if he's too stubborn to listen." My heart hammered in my chest. They weren't making room for progress. They were clearing a crime scene in advance. I stayed frozen in that closet until the footsteps faded, then slipped out the back of the clubhouse with a phone full of evidence and a fire in my gut. This wasn't a renovation, this was a coup, and they were about to find out what happens when you mistake nostalgia for weakness. I couldn't sleep, not with the weight of the deed, the threats, and that awful memo still echoing in my mind. Accidents happen. So when my phone buzzed at 2:13 a.m., my stomach flipped before I even opened the alert. My motion security cameras had picked up two shadows creeping across my property, both carrying red gas cans. They moved like amateurs, nervous, twitchy, stupidly loud for would-be arsonists. One tripped over a flower box, the other tried to unscrew the cap mid-stride and nearly soaked himself. But they made it to the cabin's porch, where they started sloshing fuel around like it was just another HOA board meeting and they were dousing objections. I was already dialing Officer Dave Miller before they lit a match. By the time I ran out with a flashlight and a Louisville slugger, the two goons were halfway down the driveway, spooked, sloppy, and now caught in HD. Let me be clear, they weren't torching wood. They were trying to erase the last page of a family book. My grandfather didn't handcraft that chimney so it could be cremated by cowards with Zippos. Officer Miller arrived 15 minutes later, still buttoning his uniform and swearing about how this HOA drama's getting more unhinged than a screen door in a hurricane. He took one look at the footage, whistled, and said, "You want me to keep an extra unit out here tonight?" I nodded. "Better yet, get me a court date." That morning, Uncle Sam was already at his desk, wearing the kind of expression that makes judges nervous. "They've gone full lunatic," he said, flipping through the night's evidence. "That's felony-level stupidity." By noon, he'd filed for an emergency injunction to block any demolition orders tied to the cabin, citing not just the deed, but now attempted property damage with criminal intent. But here's the kicker. Sam's contact at the courthouse said the HOA had already filed to fast-track a demolition order. The hearing was scheduled for Monday. That gave us 72 hours, 3 days to stop them from legally leveling everything my family built with their bare hands. And let me tell you, nothing moves faster than a bad idea wrapped in a court seal. By Friday afternoon, Rachel, the journalist I'd met back in college, published a teaser article with the headline, "HOA, accused of land grab, legal tampering, and arson plot." Just the teaser caused the local Facebook mom groups to explode like a dropped casserole at a potluck. Neighbors started calling. People I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had Barbara horror stories of their own. Excessive fines for bird feeders. HOA board members getting pool privileges for relatives. One guy said Barbara fined him for hanging his American flag at a non-regulation angle. I told Rachel, "They're going to come after you." She just smiled and said, "I don't live in their subdivision, Mike. I live in the First Amendment." And she was right, because truth spreads like fire, but it doesn't destroy, it disinfects. And suddenly, it was catching. By Saturday, the panic must have kicked in because Barbara herself showed up at my cabin with her pearls, her clipboard, and a man who looked like he billed by the minute. "Mr. Peterson," she said, voice calm like a crocodile in shallow water, "let's be reasonable. You're in over your head. We're prepared to offer you fair market value for the property." I didn't laugh, but it took effort. Market value? For the cabin or for the land under your $1 million clubhouse and pool? She blinked, then straightened her posture like she'd just been goosed. "That's absurd." I shrugged. "Then so is this conversation." Her lawyer cleared his throat, already sweating. If we were to consider a broader figure, what might be acceptable? I leaned in. 5 million, cash or certified check. Or you can take your chances with Judge Williams on Monday. Barbara looked like I'd told her she built her temple on a septic tank. You're bluffing. I smiled. Try me. That night I gathered everything. Every document, photo, security clip, and receipt. Tom from the records office emailed scans of the HOA's altered maps and the original zoning blueprints. Officer Miller flagged the footage for formal investigation and promised patrol cars would keep an eye on the property through the weekend. Sam stayed up past midnight organizing binders like he was preparing for a Supreme Court hearing. And then, at 3:40 a.m., Rachel's article hit the front page of the local paper. The headline now screamed, "Land fraud, arson plot, forged signatures, inside Lakeside Estates, legal meltdown." Comments poured in, shares, emails, even a few calls from HOA members who wanted to quietly jump ship before it sank. One woman wrote, "Thank you for standing up, I thought I was crazy." Another simply said, "Get them." And just like that, the town wasn't watching from the sidelines anymore. They were on the edge of their seats, and come Monday morning every single eye would be on the courthouse, including Barbara's, though she'd probably prefer they weren't. Because when you try to burn someone out of their home and get caught, you don't just lose the match. You lose the whole damn fire. The courtroom was packed, shoulder to shoulder, like the whole town had RSVP'd to see who'd get flattened, me or the HOA. Judge Williams walked in, glasses perched on the edge of her nose, the kind of woman who could silence a riot with a throat clear. She looked over her docket, raised an eyebrow, and said, "Highly irregular." "I have here an eviction request from the Lakeside Estates HOA against a Mr. Michael Peterson and a counterfilling that looks like a legal bombshell." Barbara's lawyer, a man named Daniel Morgan, who looked like he used expired cologne as confidence, stood up and tried to rush it through. "Your Honor, the property in question clearly falls under HOA jurisdiction. We have all the paperwork and proper enforcement notices on file. This should be a simple matter of code enforcement." But Sam stood next, slow and deliberate, holding up the original deed like it was the Constitution. "Your Honor, there's nothing simple about this. We have documents proving the cabin predates the HOA and was legally excluded from its jurisdiction. Furthermore," he paused for effect, "we believe the HOA has submitted fraudulent materials to this court." The room snapped to attention. Morgan, trying to recover, smirked and presented their ace, a signed agreement from 1995, allegedly showing that Grandpa Richard Peterson had voluntarily incorporated the cabin into Lakeside Estates. Sam didn't flinch. He handed over a death certificate. "Richard Peterson passed away in 1992, which means either he signed from the afterlife or someone here is lying to this court." You could feel the gasp move across the courtroom like a wave. The judge took the document, studied it, then slowly turned her eyes toward Barbara. "This is a serious allegation." Morgan fumbled, sweat beginning to bead at his temples. "Your Honor, I was given this by my client. I had no reason to believe it was—" Judge Williams cut him off with a stare sharp enough to strip paint. "Mr. Morgan, presenting forged documents in my courtroom as grounds for sanctions and criminal referral, I suggest you stop talking." Even the bailiff, a guy who probably hadn't smiled since 2004, cracked a grin. Then Sam brought out the heavy artillery. "Your Honor, we would like to submit evidence that not only is Mr. Peterson's cabin protected by long-standing deed, but that a significant portion of the HOA's clubhouse and pool facilities were built on land that does not belong to them. That land remains in the Peterson estate." Judge Williams blinked. "You're telling me the HOA constructed its main facility on land they don't own?" Sam nodded. "Roughly 58% of the structure, by the county's survey records." It was like dropping a match in a fireworks warehouse. Residents in the gallery started murmuring, Barbara looked like she'd been tased, and Morgan turned the color of sour cream. Judge Williams adjusted her glasses and said, "This is one of the most extraordinary property cases I've seen in 20 years. I stood up slowly, every eye on me now, and said, "Your Honor, I never wanted this fight, but I'm not backing down either. The courtroom held its breath as I laid out my proposal. I'm willing to sell the land under the clubhouse back to the HOA, at a reduced rate, but only under 3 conditions. First, my cabin is legally exempt from all current and future HOA rules. Second, the current HOA board resigns and is replaced by a democratically elected body. And third, the sale proceeds, $1 million, go directly into a community scholarship fund in my grandfather's name. The judge leaned back, studying me. That's remarkably generous. I nodded. This isn't about revenge. It's about fixing what's broken. I wasn't selling land, I was planting redemption. Some people clapped before remembering they were in court, others just nodded. Even Morgan, who was probably hoping to crawl under the bench, didn't object. Judge Williams banged her gavel gently and said, "Pending review of all terms, I find this a reasonable and community-beneficial solution. All HOA activities are hereby frozen until further notice. No expenditures, no enforcement actions, no decisions made without court approval." Barbara stood, opened her mouth like she was about to deliver her final monologue, but nothing came out. It was as if every ounce of her authority had been vacuumed out and replaced with silence. The crowd started to murmur, and then a voice from the back said what everyone else was thinking. "Looks like the HOA just got evicted." I didn't say anything. I just turned to Sam and gave him the nod. Not the kind of nod you give when you win a war, but the kind you give when you know you just defended something that never should have been threatened in the first place. I didn't win. The truth just showed up and clocked in. 3 months after that final gavel drop, Lakeside Estates looked nothing like the HOA dictatorship Barbara had once ruled. The board had been completely overhauled. Elaine Cooper was elected president, an actual voice of reason with a spine made of ethics and a to-do list written in Sharpie. Steve Rogers stepped in as vice president, trading his architectural blueprints for bylaw rewrites. The residents who used to whisper complaints now shouted "reform" at potlucks. Term limits were established, fines were audited, and decisions were made by actual votes instead of wine club coronations. And the cabin, oh, the cabin. It stood tall, cedar siding freshly treated, flower boxes blooming rebelliously with every plant the old HOA had once banned. Local carpenters, some of whom had known my grandfather, volunteered their time. The town finally remembered that preserving something real felt a lot better than polishing fake perfection. My home wasn't just saved, it became the heart of the community. And here's the kicker. Jessica Wilson, Barbara's own daughter, the same woman who once designed my cabin into a wellness center, Sketch, showed up at my door with paint samples and apology muffins. She offered to help restore the place with a focus on integrity and original intent. I half expected a hidden microphone. But no, she was sincere and good. Her touch was thoughtful, quiet. She sourced reclaimed materials that matched Grandpa's original work. Her plans respected the bones of the building like she was drawing blueprints for a museum, not a makeover. I watched her work in the same space she once meant to erase and realized something both infuriating and beautiful. Sometimes redemption shows up with a toolbox and almond flour muffins. The woman meant to erase history became part of its preservation. Poetic irony never sanded smoother. The scholarship launched 2 weeks later. The Richard Peterson Memorial Foundation, funded by the land deal with the HOA, awarded 10 grants to local students. 5 headed to college, 5 into trades, carpentry, environmental science, architecture, agriculture, the kinds of work Grandpa would have cheered for. Instead of HOA board members hoarding money to line their pockets, the new committee published every dollar spent, and wouldn't you know it, people started actually attending HOA meetings. Willingly. We turned the old clubhouse into a real community center. Movie nights, potlucks, tutoring sessions, even the annual HOA meeting was bearable now. The very land they once tried to steal became the foundation for something real. My grandfather used to say, "The best plans are ones that leave space for others." He didn't just leave space. He left blueprints for decency. Barbara, on the other hand, became a ghost. She pled guilty to fraud and document tampering, struck a deal for probation, and vanished like fog at noon. No more power lunches, no more smirks behind city council tables. Her name, once spoken in every driveway, now existed only in cautionary tales told over lemonade. She was once a thunderstorm, loud, arrogant, dramatic. Now she was just fog. Silent, gutted. The HOA system she'd weaponized had been gutted, its rules rewritten, its reign ended by the very people she used to bully. I heard she moved 2 towns over, tried joining another HOA. The rumor? They rejected her application. Karma doesn't knock. It revokes your Clubhouse keycard and mails you a newsletter about humility. And me? I sip my coffee on the porch most mornings. Same swing Grandpa carved. Same chimney holding stories between the stones. The lake reflects everything now. Light, community, lessons. I've had folks ask if I feel like I won, but this wasn't a contest, it was a test. And we passed it with mud on our boots and ink on real deeds. I remember what Grandpa used to say when I was a kid helping him stain the porch. You don't carve legacy with control. You carve it with care. Barbara tried to chisel everything into uniformity. Grandpa, he let the wood speak for itself, and now his cabin isn't just mine, it's everyone's reminder that peace doesn't come from rules, but from roots. So here's my final word on it all. Sometimes justice doesn't shout. It doesn't bang on gables or file noise complaints. Sometimes justice just waits, right where you left it, rocking gently on a porch swing built by hands that never needed a permit. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts.